The scalding broth dripped from my hair onto my lap. But the silence in the dining room burned hotter than the soup. My daughter looked down at me with pure disgust, holding the empty bowl like a weapon, all because I had asked for a second helping. They thought I was powerless. They did not know that by the next morning, the comfortable life they took for granted would begin to collapse. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 56 years old, and for the last decade, I have defined myself by two simple facts. I am Richard's widow, and I am Rebecca's mother. For a long time, those titles felt like enough to fill the empty rooms of my life. I lived a standard American life, working double shifts at a diner down on 4th Street to make sure Rebecca never felt the gap her father left behind. I scrubbed floors until my knees ached and poured coffee until my hands shook, all so she could have the braces, the prom dress, and the college tuition. She was the sun in my solar system, and I was content to just orbit around her warmth. But gravity changes when children grow up. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, after she married David. They moved into a sleek, modern house in the suburbs, a place with white carpets and glass tables that terrified me. I remember the first time I visited them after the honeymoon. I sat on their beige sofa, afraid to move, afraid to wrinkle the fabric. Rebecca looked different that day. She looked polished, sharp, and distant. "Mom, please use a coaster," she had said, her voice tight and devoid of the warmth I remembered. That was the beginning of the drift. Over the last 3 years, I have watched my role in her life shrink from a necessity to a burden. The daily phone calls became weekly, then they became monthly. Now, my phone sits on the kitchen counter like a heavy paperweight. When it does ring, the conversations are brief and brittle. They feel like a checklist she needs to complete before she can get back to her real life. I was just calling to see how you are," I would say, my voice trembling slightly as I gripped the receiver. "Mum, I'm really busy right now. Can we talk later?" she would reply. And the line would go dead before I could even say goodbye. I sit in my small apartment now, surrounded by photos of a little girl who no longer exists. The silence here is physical. It presses against my eardrums and fills the space between the furniture. I spend my evenings watching television shows I do not care about, just to hear human voices in the room. I cook meals for one, eating standing up at the counter because sitting at the table alone feels too pathetic to bear. I try to be rational about it. I tell myself this is the natural order of things. Children leave the nest. They build their own families. They get busy with careers and mortgages and social climbs. It is selfish of me to want more. It is selfish of me to expect her to hold my hand when she has her own husband to hold. You are just getting old. Margaret, I say to my reflection in the hallway mirror. Stop being so needy. But the logic does not stop the ache in my chest. It does not stop the feeling that I have been used up and discarded, like a wrapper after the candy is eaten. I poured every ounce of my youth and strength into that girl. I hollowed myself out to fill her up, and now that she is full and whole, she has no use for the empty shell that remains. Last week, I called to ask if she wanted to go to lunch. "Mum, I can't right now. David's parents are coming over," she said. David's parents. The wealthy ones. The ones who bring expensive wine and talk about their vacations in Europe. I am just Margaret. The one who brings Tupperware containers of lasagna and talks about the weather. I hung up the phone and stared out the window at the grey street below. The realization hit me then, cold and sharp. I do not know where I belong anymore. I am a mother without a child to mother. I am a widow without a husband to mourn with. I am floating in a void, tethered to nothing and no one. And the terrifying part is that I suspect my daughter prefers it this way. The invitation had come via a text message 3 days ago, not a phone call. It was my grandson's 10th birthday, a milestone that should have been celebrated with warmth. But as I walked up the driveway of Rebecca and David's pristine suburban home, I felt like an intruder. The driveway was packed with luxury sedans and SUVs. I parked my old sedan a block away to avoid cluttering their view, a habit I had developed over the last few years without anyone ever asking me to do so. Inside, the house was vibrating with noise. Laughter bounced off the high ceilings, and the smell of expensive catering filled the air. I stepped into the foyer, clutching the small, brightly wrapped gift box I had spent hours selecting. It was a vintage compass, something meaningful. I hoped. David breezed past me carrying a bucket of ice. He did not stop. He did not smile. "Oh, you made it," he said, his voice flat. He didn't look at my face, only at the space behind me, as if checking to see if I had tracked mud onto his hardwood floors. "Happy birthday to the boy," I said, trying to infuse cheer into my voice. But he was already gone, disappearing into the kitchen. I found Rebecca in the living room. She was directing 2 servers with sharp, frantic hand gestures. She looked beautiful in a silk dress, but her eyes were tight at the corners. When she saw me, her shoulders didn't drop in relief, they rose in tension. "Mom, please don't stand in the doorway," she snapped, her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "People are trying to get through. I just wanted to give him his gift," I said, holding out the box. She took it without looking at it and tossed it onto a pile of massive, glossy boxes on the side table. It looked tiny and pathetic next to the drones and video game consoles. "We are eating in 10 minutes. Just find a spot and try not to be in the way," she said, turning her back on me to greet a woman in a red dress with a dazzling, fake smile. I drifted through the party like a ghost. I tried to join a conversation near the fireplace, a group of parents talking about summer camps in Europe. I stood on the periphery, smiling, nodding, waiting for an opening that never came. When I finally cleared my throat to speak, offering a small comment about how fast the children were growing, the circle tightened, physically closing me out. They did not hear me? Or perhaps they did. And they simply did not care. Dinner was served at a long mahogany table. I was seated at the far end, next to a cousin of David's, who spent the entire meal texting on his phone. The noise of silverware scraping against china was deafening in my ears. I looked down the table at my daughter. She was laughing at something David's boss was saying, her head thrown back, her hand resting on David's arm. They looked like the perfect couple. They looked like strangers. I reached for the water pitcher, my hand trembling slightly from hunger and nerves. The glass clinked against the crystal pitcher, a sharp, ringing sound that cut through the chatter. Rebecca's head snapped toward me. Her eyes narrowed. It was a look of pure irritation, a silent reprimand that screamed, "Stop embarrassing me." I am sorry," I whispered, pulling my hand back. "David," Rebecca said, her voice sugary sweet, but with a blade hidden underneath. "Could you help my mother? She seems to be struggling." David sighed. It was a loud, heavy exhale that everyone at our end of the table heard. He didn't stand up. He just slid the pitcher toward me with a force that made water slosh over the rim. "There. he said. I poured my water in silence. Around me. The party continued. People were eating, drinking, and celebrating life. Yet, as I sat there, surrounded by my own flesh and blood, I felt a coldness seeping into my bones that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The house was full of people, but for me, it was completely empty. I looked at Rebecca again, hoping to catch her eye, hoping for a wink or a soft smile, something that said, I know this is chaotic, but I am glad you are here. Instead, she was pointedly looking away, slicing her steak with aggressive precision. The message was clear in the set of her jaw and the stiffness of her spine. I was not a guest of honor. I was an obligation, and obligations are meant to be tolerated, not enjoyed. The hunger was a physical ache in the center of my chest, sharper than the cold indifference of the room. I had not eaten a proper meal in nearly 24 hours, saving my appetite and my limited budget for this party. The first course had been a small, delicate bowl of butternut squash soup, rich and creamy, but it was gone in 3 spoonfuls. As the servers began to clear the table to prepare for the main course, I looked at the silver tureen sitting on the sideboard. It was still half full. I leaned toward my daughter, keeping my voice low so as not to disturb the man texting beside me. Rebecca, honey? I whispered, touching her arm lightly. Do you think I could have just a little more soup? I haven't eaten all day. The music seemed to stop the moment the words left my mouth. Rebecca froze. She turned to me, and the mask of the perfect hostess slipped completely. Underneath, there was something ugly and raw. Are you serious right now? She hissed, loud enough for the people across from us to look up. We are in the middle of a dinner service, and you are begging for scraps. I am not begging, I stammered, my face heating up. I just asked. It is sitting right there. You are always doing this, she said, her voice rising, cutting through the ambient chatter of the room. Always taking, always wanting more. Do you have any idea how embarrassing you are? You sit there in your cheap dress, looking at everything like you are starving, like we don't take care of you. It makes us look bad. Mother. The room went deadly silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward us. I felt naked, stripped of all dignity. Rebecca, please, I said, my voice shaking. Everyone is looking. Let's not do this here. No, she shouted, standing up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. I am sick of it. I am sick of you acting like a victim. You want soup. You want it so bad. She reached for the porcelain bowl that had not yet been cleared from my placemat. It still had a few spoonfuls left, but she did not stop there. In a blind fit of rage, she grabbed the ladle from the tureen on the sideboard behind her and filled the bowl until it sloshed over the sides. The steam rose from it, thick and heavy. Here she screamed. Before I could raise my hands to protect myself, she thrust the bowl forward. She did not hand it to me. She flipped her wrist. The liquid hit me like a physical slap. It was hot, scaldingly hot, but the shock numbed the burn for the first second. The thick, orange soup cascaded over my hair, ran down my forehead, and dripped onto my eyelashes. It soaked into the collar of my dress, staining the fabric I had ironed so carefully that morning. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. I sat there, frozen. I could feel a droplet of soup running down the bridge of my nose. I did not wipe it away. I could not move. I looked around the table, desperate for someone, anyone, to stand up. I looked at David. He was staring at his plate, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at the other guests. They were looking at their laps, at the walls, anywhere but at the old woman dripping with soup. No one spoke. No one offered a napkin. No one told Rebecca she had gone too far. "There," Rebecca said, her chest heaving, her face flushed with adrenaline. "Now you have your soup. Are you happy now?" In that moment, something inside me broke. It was not a loud break. It was the quiet snap of a tether that had been pulled too tight for too long. I looked at the woman standing above me. This was the child I had nursed through fevers. This was the girl I had worked double shifts for. This was the person I had loved more than my own life. And she had just poured soup on my head like I was a stray dog. The burn started to register on my scalp now, a stinging reminder of my reality. I was not her mother anymore. I was not a person to her. I was a nuisance. I was a stain on her perfect life that she wanted to wash away. The humiliation burned hotter than the soup, searing a hole through my heart where my love for her used to be. The illusion was gone. The hope was gone. And as the soup dripped from my chin onto my lap, I realized that Margaret Holloway, the mother, had died in that chair. I stood up slowly. I did not wipe the soup from my face. I did not try to salvage my dignity with a napkin or a joke. I simply turned around and walked toward the front door. The silence in the room was heavy, like a physical weight pressing against my back. But not a single chair scraped against the floor. No footsteps hurried after me. No voice called out Mom, wait, or Margaret. Stop. There was only the sound of my own sensible heels clicking against the hardwood, a lonely rhythm that marked my exit from their lives. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and shadows. I kept the radio off. I needed the silence to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, the air smelled stale, like old books and lemon polish. It was the smell of a life lived in waiting. I walked straight to the bathroom and turned on the harsh overhead light. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Her grey hair was matted with orange grease. Her eyes were red and swollen, not from tears, but from the stinging salt of the broth. Pieces of parsley clung to her collar like mock jewelry. I stared at her for a long time. I expected to feel the familiar wave of shame, the voice in my head that usually whispered you should not have asked, or you were too loud. But tonight, the voice was silent. I turned on the shower, letting the water run until it was steaming hot. As I scrubbed the soup from my skin, I scrubbed away years of illusions. I thought about the double shifts at the diner. I remembered the winter I wore a coat with a broken zipper so I could buy Rebecca the prom dress she claimed she would die without. I remembered the nights I sat up helping her with history projects when I could barely keep my eyes open from exhaustion. I had given her everything. I had hollowed out my own bones to build her foundation, and her repayment was a bowl of soup poured over my head. I stepped out of the shower and wrapped a towel around my shivering body. I wiped the steam from the mirror and looked at myself again. The orange stains were gone. The woman looking back at me was clean. But she was different. The softness around her mouth had hardened. The desperation in her eyes had been replaced by a cold, clear stillness. For the first time in my life, I did not blame myself. It was not my fault that I was hungry. It was not my fault that I existed. I walked into my small kitchen and poured a glass of water. I sat at the table where I had eaten so many solitary meals. I looked around at the modest furniture, the chipped plates, the life of a woman who had saved every penny for a future that did not include her. Rebecca and David saw this apartment and saw failure. They saw a woman with nothing. They saw a leech who needed to be scraped off before she drained them dry. "They think I am nothing," I whispered to the empty room. The words hung in the air. A strange calmness settled over me. They believed I was helpless. They believed I was dependent on their scraps. They believed they held all the power because they had the big house and the expensive cars. But they were wrong. They had forgotten that I was the one who taught Rebecca how to walk. I was the one who taught her how to survive. If they thought I was a burden, then I would show them what a burden truly looked like. But first, I had to see if there was anything left to save. I had to know, with absolute certainty, that the bridge was burned before I let the rest of it crumble. If I really had nothing, I said aloud, testing the shape of the idea, would they still let me fall? A plan began to form in the quiet dark of my kitchen. It was not a plan born of malice, but of necessity. It was a test, a final exam for a daughter who had failed every lesson in kindness I had ever taught her. I would give them one last chance to be human. And if they failed, I would show them exactly who Margaret Holloway really was. 2 days after the incident with the soup, my phone rang at 10 in the morning. I assumed it was a telemarketer or perhaps a bill collector, but the voice on the other end was smooth, professional, and entirely unfamiliar. "Mrs. Holloway, my name is Jonathan Sterling. I am an attorney representing the estate of the late Arthur Vance. Do you have a moment to speak, Arthur Vance?" The name was a dusty memory from my childhood. A second cousin who had moved to the West Coast 40 years ago and never looked back. I sat down at my kitchen table, my hand gripping the receiver tight. I remember him," I said, my voice steady despite my confusion. Has something happened?" "Vance passed away last month," Mr. Sterling said. "He was a man of considerable privacy and had no immediate family. After an extensive search, we determined that you are his closest living relative and sole beneficiary." I listened as he explained the details. It seemed Arthur had invested wisely in real estate and technology stocks back when they were worth pennies. I sat in silence as he listed assets, properties, and liquid funds. When he finally stated the total value of the inheritance, the air left my lungs. After taxes and fees, the liquid assets amount to $4,250,000, he said. I stared at the chipped paint on my kitchen wall. $4 million. 2 days ago. I had been humiliated for asking for a second bowl of soup because I could not afford groceries. Today, I was a millionaire. The universe was not just cruel. It was laughing at me. "Mrs. Holloway are you still there?" "Yes." I breathed, feeling a strange hysteria bubbling in my throat. "I am here. I need a moment." I spent the rest of the afternoon in the lawyer's downtown office, signing papers and verifying my identity. When I walked out onto the busy street, the check was deposited in a new account that only I knew about. I stood on the corner, watching the expensive cars drive by. I could walk into the nearest dealership and buy 2 of them with cash. I could buy the house next door to Rebecca and David just to spite them. I could buy the catering company that served the soup and fire everyone. But I did not do any of those things. Instead, I took the bus home. As the bus rattled through the city, a cold clarity settled over me, I looked at the phone in my purse. The old Margaret would have called Rebecca immediately. I would have cried with joy, telling her that our struggles were over, that I could finally help them with the mortgage or the renovation they wanted. And I knew exactly what would happen. Rebecca would cry. She would apologize for the party, blaming stress or hormones. David would suddenly find the time to talk to me. They would welcome me back with open arms. But they would not be hugging me. They would be hugging the money. No, I whispered to my reflection in the bus window. Not this time. I decided then and there that Arthur Vance's legacy would remain a secret. No one would know. Not my neighbours, not my few remaining friends, and certainly not my daughter. This money was not a lifeline for them. It was a tool for me. It gave me something I had not possessed in years. It gave me leverage. I sat in my apartment that evening, eating a simple sandwich. But the food tasted different now. It tasted like choice. I looked at the family photo on the mantelpiece, the one taken years ago when Rebecca was a teenager. I loved her. God knows I still loved her. But love without respect is just servitude. And I was done serving. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see the bottom of their hearts without the golden filter of wealth to obscure the view. If they were to be in my life, it had to be because they wanted me, the mother, not the benefactor. A plan began to crystallize in my mind. It was cold, necessary, and dangerous. I would not tell them I was rich. I would tell them the exact opposite. I would tell them I had lost everything. If I tell them I am homeless, I said to the empty room, my voice flat and devoid of the trembling sadness that used to define me. If I tell them I have nowhere to go, what will they do? It was the ultimate test. If they took me in, even grudgingly, I would share everything with them. I would forgive the soup. I would forgive the neglect. But if they turned me away when I was at my lowest, then they deserved nothing. I picked up the phone, not to call them, but to check the battery. It was fully charged. I set it back down. I would wait one more day. I needed to prepare my performance. I needed to look desperate. I needed to be the burden they always feared I would become. The old Margaret was dead. The woman who sat in her chair now was worth millions, and she was about to find out exactly what her family was worth. I chose a Tuesday evening to execute the plan. It was a rainy, miserable night, perfect for the narrative I was about to spin. I wore my oldest coat, the one with the fraying cuffs, and I left my hair unstyled. I looked exactly like what I was pretending to be, a desperate old woman on the brink of homelessness. I did not drive my car. I took a cab to the corner and walked the rest of the way to their house, letting the drizzle dampen my shoulders. When Rebecca opened the door, her face fell. She was expecting a delivery driver, not her mother. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked, not stepping aside to let me in. I need to talk to you and David," I said, pitching my voice to sound thin and wavering. "It is important." She sighed, a sharp intake of breath that signaled her annoyance, but she stepped back. We went into the living room. David was on the couch watching a game. He did not mute the television. "I have bad news," I started, wringing my hands together. "My landlord, he is raising the rent. He wants another $500 a month starting next week. I can't afford it, Rebecca. I have nowhere to go." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but I delivered it with perfect conviction. I watched their faces closely. I was looking for a flicker of concern, a shadow of worry. There was none. Rebecca exchanged a look with David. It was a look of panic, but not for me. It was the panic of people who see a problem they do not want to solve. "Mom, that is terrible," Rebecca said, but she remained standing. "But surely you can find a smaller place. Or maybe the government has programs. I have looked." I lied. "Everything is full or too expensive. I just need a place for a month or two, just until I get back on my feet. Your guest room, it is empty, isn't it?" The silence stretched. The television blared in the background, a cheer from a crowd of strangers filling the void where their compassion should have been. "Rebecca," David said, his voice hard. "We talked about this." Rebecca turned to me, her expression pinched. "Mom, look, we would love to help, but it is just a really bad time for us right now. David is stressed with work, and we are thinking of turning the guest room into a home gym. We really need the space. A home gym. They were choosing a treadmill over my safety. I would not be a bother." I pressed, pushing them to the very edge. I could cook. I could clean. I would stay out of your way. Please. I am scared." "No," David said. He did not look at Rebecca this time. He looked straight at me. "It is not going to work, Margaret. Having you here? It changes the dynamic. We need our privacy. You are an adult. You need to figure this out on your own," Rebecca said, feigning shock at his bluntness, but she did not contradict him. She looked at me with pity, but it was the cold, distant pity one feels for a roadkill animal. He is right. Mom, it would be too much strain on our marriage. You understand, don't you? You don't want to cause problems for us." I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the relief in their eyes when they thought I would back down. They were not worried about where I would sleep. They were worried I would inconvenience their Tuesday evening. I did not cry. The old Margaret would have wept. She would have begged. She would have apologized for being a burden. But I simply nodded, cataloguing every word, every excuse, every selfish flicker in their eyes. I was recording this moment in permanent ink in my mind. "I see," I said softly. "I understand perfectly. We can look up some shelters online for you," Rebecca offered weakly. "That won't be necessary," I said, standing up. My knees did not shake. My hands were steady. I walked to the door. They did not try to stop me. They did not offer me a ride home in the rain. As I stepped out onto the porch, I heard the lock click shut behind me almost instantly. I walked down the driveway, the rain mixing with the cold night air. I felt lighter than I had in years. The last tether was cut. They had failed the test. They had made their choice. And now, I was free to make mine. I reached into my pocket and touched the debit card connected to the account with $4 million. "Okay," I whispered into the darkness. "Game over." 3 days after they left me standing in the rain, I sent a text message to Rebecca. It was short and commanded a presence I had not demanded in years. I wrote simply, "Come to the apartment tonight, both of you. It is urgent." I knew they would come. They likely assumed I was finally ready to be shipped off to a state-run shelter and needed them to sign some paperwork. Or perhaps they thought I was going to beg for money again. When they walked through my door at 7 in the evening, the air of impatience they carried was suffocating. Rebecca did not take off her coat. She stood near the entryway, checking her expensive wristwatch every few seconds. "Mom," We really don't have much time, she said, her voice sharp and clipped. We have dinner reservations with the Millers in an hour. If this is about the rent money again. David already told you our position. I was sitting in my armchair, the one with the faded floral pattern. I did not stand up to greet them. I did not offer them tea or the cinnamon cookies Rebecca used to love when she was a child. I simply pointed to the sofa opposite me. Sit down, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was steady. It lacked the quavering uncertainty they were used to. Rebecca blinked, surprised by the tone, and exchanged a confused glance with David, reluctantly. They sat on the edge of the sofa, looking like they were ready to bolt at the first opportunity. "What is this about?" Margaret David asked, checking his phone. "I want to talk about the soup," I said. Rebecca threw her head back and let out a dramatic, exasperated sigh. "Oh my God. Are we really doing this right now?" she asked, looking at the ceiling as if asking for divine intervention. "Mum, it was an accident. I told you. I slipped. The ladle was heavy, and my hand was greasy. You know how clumsy I get when I'm stressed." I watched her. I watched the way she lied so easily, rewriting history to suit her comfort. She had convinced herself of this version of events because the truth that she had assaulted her own mother out of spite was too ugly to look at. "You did not slip," I said, my voice low. "You looked me in the eye. You were angry because I asked for food, and you flipped your wrist." "I was under a lot of pressure," Rebecca snapped, her face flushing red. "You have no idea what it takes to host a party like that. And you were sitting there making me look like a bad daughter, begging for seconds like you were starving. You always make everything about you." "I was starving," I replied calmly. "But that is not the point. The point is that you felt justified in hurting me." "I did not hurt you." "Stop being so dramatic," she shouted, waving her hand dismissively. "It was just soup. It washed out, didn't it? Why do you always have to be such a victim?" I let the silence stretch between us. The radiator hissed in the corner, the only sound in the tense room. I looked at David, who was staring at his shoes, refusing to engage. Then I looked back at the daughter I had raised. "I came to you on Tuesday," I said, shifting the subject. "I told you I was losing my home. I told you I had nowhere to go. And you closed the door on me." "We explained that," Rebecca said, her tone defensive. "We have boundaries. Mom, we can't just let you move in and disrupt our lives. It isn't healthy. I have a question for you." "Rebecca," I said. I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with her. "And I want you to answer it honestly. If I have nothing, if I cannot give you money, or free babysitting, or status, if I am just an old woman with empty hands, do you still need me?" The room went deadly quiet. Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. She looked at David, then back at me. She shifted in her seat, smoothing the fabric of her coat over her knees. That is a manipulative question," she stammered, avoiding my gaze. "Of course we care about you, but relationships are two-way streets. Mom, you can't just expect us to carry you when things get hard." "You didn't answer the question," I said softly. "I did answer it," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "You are just twisting my words. Look, we really have to go. We are going to be late for dinner." She stood up abruptly, signaling that the conversation was over. She wanted to escape. She wanted to run back to her world where she was the good person, the victim of a needy mother. She did not want to face the reality of who she had become. "Sit down, Rebecca," I said. "No. We are leaving," she said, reaching for her purse. "Call us when you are ready to stop acting like this." I said, "Sit down," I commanded, my voice cutting through the room like a whip. "Because I am not done. And you are going to want to hear the rest of what I have to say." Something in my tone stopped her. It was not the voice of a mother pleading for attention. It was the voice of a judge delivering a verdict. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the strap of her bag. For the first time all evening, I saw a flicker of genuine unease in her eyes. She slowly lowered herself back onto the sofa. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with the electricity of a coming storm. They thought they knew me. They thought they knew the script of this play. But they had no idea that I had rewritten the ending. I reached into my purse, but I did not pull out a tissue to wipe away tears. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a bank statement, printed that morning, showing the current balance of my newly opened account. I placed it on the coffee table between us, smoothing out the crease with a slow, deliberate hand. "I did not lie about the rent because I needed money," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I lied because I needed to know who you were. And you showed me." David leaned forward, squinting at the paper. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I saw the moment the number registered in his brain. His eyes widened, and his jaw actually went slack. He looked up at me, then back at the paper, then at Rebecca. "Becky," he whispered, his voice sounding strangled. "Look at this." Rebecca frowned, annoyed by his interruption. What is it?" She snatched the paper from the table. She read it. Then she read it again. The colour drained from her face, leaving her pale and ghostly. Her hands began to tremble, rattling the paper. $4 million, she stammered. $4,250,000. Mom, what? Is this real? My cousin Arthur Vance died last month, I explained, watching them like a scientist observing specimens in a jar. He left me everything, all of it. I have been a millionaire since the day before I came to your house in the rain. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It was not heavy or awkward. It was electric. It was the sound of gears grinding in their heads, recalculating their entire reality. I saw the realization hit Rebecca. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, she really saw me, but she did not see her mother. She saw a winning lottery ticket. The transformation was immediate and nauseating. The sharpness in her shoulders melted away. The scowl on her face vanished, replaced by a look of wide-eyed, frantic affection. "Oh my God." "Mom," she gasped, dropping the paper and reaching out to grab my hands. Her palms were sweaty. That is incredible. I can't believe it. Why? Why didn't you tell us we could have been celebrating?" "I wanted to surprise you," I said, my face remaining impassive. David was suddenly sitting up straight, a bright, eager smile plastered across his face. He looked like a man who had just found water in a desert. "Margaret, this is fantastic news," he said, his voice booming with false conviviality. "I always said good things happen to good people. You deserve this. You really do." "Do I?" I asked. 10 minutes ago. I deserved to be homeless because I was a burden on your marriage." The air in the room stuttered. Rebecca laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. She squeezed my hands tighter, as if she could absorb the money through my skin. "Oh, Mum, Don't be silly, she said quickly. We didn't mean that. You know how it is. We were just stressed. David had a bad day at work, and I was just overwhelmed. We would never actually let you end up on the street. We were just trying to encourage you to be independent. It was tough love, that's all. Tough love. I repeated. Exactly. David chimed in, nodding vigorously. And hey, about the guest room. We can put the gym idea on hold. Totally on hold. In fact, why don't you stay with us for a while until you figure out what you want to buy? It would be great to have you around. The kids miss their grandma. I looked at them. I looked at the daughter who had poured soup on my head and the son-in-law who had treated me like a stain on his floor. They were leaning toward me now, their bodies angled in submission, their eyes shining with greed. They were not apologizing because they were sorry. They were apologizing because the price of admission to my life had just gone up, and they were desperate to pay it. It was a clarity so sharp, it cut. They did not love me. They did not even like me. They loved what I could give them, when I had nothing but love to offer. I was trash, now that I had millions. I was a treasure. So what are you thinking? Rebecca asked, her voice breathless. We could look at new houses together. Or maybe a vacation? We could all go to Italy. You always wanted to go to Italy, didn't you? Mom, I pulled my hands away from hers. The warmth of her skin felt slimy to me now. Yes, I said quietly. I did. I stood up. They stood up with me, hovering, eager to please, eager to serve. The shift in power was absolute. I was no longer the beggar at the feast. I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. And as I looked at their hopeful, greedy faces, I knew exactly what I had to do. The decision had been made the moment the soup hit my scalp, but only now, in the light of their hypocrisy, was I ready to execute it. Stop, I said. The word was not shouted, but it landed with the weight of a gavel striking wood. Rebecca froze in the middle of a sentence about villa rentals in Tuscany. Her smile, which had been so wide and dazzling a moment ago, faltered at the edges. What? She asked, a nervous laugh bubbling up in her throat. What do you mean? Mom, we are just dreaming a little. There will be no villa, I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice water. There will be no vacation, and there will be no new house for you and David. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. David took a half step back, his hands sliding into his pockets, as if searching for an anchor. Rebecca's face hardened, the mask of the dutiful daughter slipping to reveal the petulant child beneath. I don't understand, she said, her voice dropping an octave. You have all this money. What are you going to do with it? Hoard it while your own daughter struggles. You are not struggling, Rebecca, I replied. You are comfortable. You have a home. You have cars. You have more than I ever had when I was raising you. But that is not the point. The point is that 10 minutes ago, when you thought I was poor, I was not welcome in your home. Now that you know I'm rich, you want to take me to Italy. Do you really think I am that foolish? We apologized, she snapped, the anger flaring up instantly, hot and ugly. God, why do you have to be so difficult? We said we were sorry. What more do you want? Do you want me to beg? Is that it? You want to humiliate me like I humiliated you? No, I said calmly. I do not want your humiliation. I do not want your begging. I do not want anything from you anymore. And that is why you are not getting a penny of this money. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had detonated, leaving a vacuum in its wake. Rebecca stared at me, her mouth slightly open, unable to process the word no. She had never heard it from me before. Not really. You? You can't do that? She whispered, her voice trembling with rage. I am your daughter. I am your only child. You have to leave it to me. It is the law. It is not the law, I corrected her. And it is already done. I met with Mr. Sterling yesterday. The trust is drafted. The beneficiaries have been named. And your name is nowhere on that document. You are lying, she screamed. She lunged forward, her hands balled into fists at her sides. You are doing this to punish me. You are doing this out of spite because of the soup. You are a vindictive, bitter old woman. It is not about the soup, I said, standing my ground. I did not flinch at her volume. I felt taller than I had in years. And it is not about punishment. It is about value. I spent my life teaching you that family matters more than things. I spent my life showing you that love is about sacrifice, not transaction. But you did not learn. You see people as assets, Rebecca. You see relationships as investments. If I give you this money, I am not helping you. I am feeding the worst part of you. I am validating your belief that you can treat people like garbage and still get the prize. I am your family, she shrieked, tears of frustration streaming down her face now. Family helps each other. Family treats each other with respect, I countered, my voice cutting through her hysteria. Family does not pour boiling liquid on a mother because she is hungry. Family does not turn a mother away in the rain because she is inconvenient. You broke the contract, Rebecca, not me. David placed a hand on her shoulder, perhaps to calm her, or perhaps to stop her from saying something that would cost them even more. She shook him off violently. Get out, she hissed at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. If you are going to be like this, then just get out. Keep your money. Die alone on your pile of cash for all I care. See who holds your hand when you are sick. I will hire a nurse, I said simply, and she will hold my hand because I pay her to, which is more honest than what you are doing right now. I picked up my purse. I did not look back at the bank statement on the table. It was just paper. I walked to the door, my steps steady and sure. Behind me, I heard Rebecca sobbing, a sound of pure, thwarted greed. It was a sound that used to break my heart, but tonight, it just sounded like noise. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The air was cool and fresh. I did not feel lonely. I did not feel guilty. For the first time in 56 years, I felt entirely, completely free. I had lost a daughter. Yes. But I had found myself. And as I walked away from their door, I knew I would never knock on it again. It has been 6 months since I walked out of that hallway, leaving my daughter sobbing over a fortune she would never touch. I did not move into a mansion, nor did I buy a fleet of sports cars. Instead, I bought a beautiful, sun-drenched cottage near the coast, a place with a garden full of hydrangeas and a kitchen that smells of lavender and sea salt. It is a home for me, not a storage unit for a forgotten relative. I wake up when I want to. I eat what I want to. And most importantly, I never have to ask anyone for permission to exist. The money did not just buy me comfort. It bought me purpose. I realized that there are thousands of women just like I was, Women who gave everything to their families only to be treated like invisible furniture when they grew old. So, I established the Vance Holloway Grant. It is a foundation dedicated to providing housing and legal assistance to elderly women who have been financially abused or abandoned by their families. Every time I sign a check to help a woman secure her own apartment or pay for her groceries, I feel a healing fracture inside my own heart, mending. Rebecca tried to reach out. Of course. For the first few weeks. My phone rang incessantly. She left voicemails that swung wildly from tearful apologies to angry accusations. "Mum, please pick up. I didn't mean what I said." She sobbed in one message. "You are being so selfish. You can't just abandon us," she screamed in the next. I listened to them once, and then I deleted them. I did not block her number immediately, because I needed to remind myself that her desperation was not for me. It was for the lifestyle she felt entitled to. Eventually, the calls stopped. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she and David are having financial troubles. Apparently, they had overextended themselves on credit, counting on a future inheritance that has now evaporated. They are learning, for the first time, what it means to actually work for what you have. I do not wish them harm. I simply do not wish them anything at all. Sometimes, I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, and yes, occasionally a bowl of soup, and I look out at the ocean. I think about the woman I used to be. I think about Margaret, who was afraid to speak, afraid to take up space, afraid to be a burden. She seems like a distant relative now, a ghost who finally found peace. I used to think that a mother's job was to set herself on fire to keep her children warm. I know now that is a lie. You cannot love anyone else until you respect yourself enough to demand better. Rebecca poured soup on my head to shame me, to make me feel small. But all she did was wash away the fear. She thought she was breaking me, but she was actually setting me free. I am 56 years old. I have a new circle of friends, women who discuss books and art and travel, not utility bills and ungrateful children. Next month, I am finally going to Italy. I am going alone, and I am not afraid. I will eat pasta in Rome and drink wine in Florence, and I will toast to the woman in the mirror. The greatest revenge against those who belittle you is not to fight them. It is to outgrow them. It is to build a life so full, so rich, and so vibrant that their absence is not a hole, but a relief. I am no longer just a mother or a widow. I am Margaret. And for the first time in my life, that is more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on Margaret's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach even more people.